The OneHit was made in 2023 by Onemore Technology for the Pandora Gun Max gaming system. While this is an undocumented feature, it is PC compatible. I will just briefly talk about the Pandora Gun Max and then give an in-depth review of the OneHit light gun. I briefly mentioned the Pandora Gun Max and the OneHit already in episode 250, where I covered the similar retro shooter light gun. Onemore Technology bet 3 hacks to the punch and released the OneHit slightly before the much hyped retro shooter light gun. The two base systems are pretty similar and can be described as arcade and console emulation devices, which offer an extremely large, non-curated, non-licensed library of games on a system-on-a-chip computer, which runs some flavor of Linux. Personally, I don't own either of those systems, but with the 7000 plus games of the Pandora Gun Max not being tested nor curated, some titles are certain to not run very well on the limited hardware. The Pandora Gun Max currently ships with 177 light gun games, which is more than the Pandora 10 system has. There's a secret about the internals of the OneHit light gun. They were made by Ultimark and are based on their well-known aim-track platform. As part of the agreement, Onemore Technology must not tell anybody about the PC compatibility of the OneHit and don't speak about the identity nor degree of involvement of the original manufacturer. Also, Onemore Technology agreed to solely sell the OneHit bundled with their gaming system. They were ought to remove software compatibility to the aim-track configuration tool, but evidently that failed. I discovered the whole thing after I noticed similarities to the aim-track light gun. I then went on and compared things like USB PID and VID and Windows Game Controller name handles. When they all matched up, I contacted Andrew Ron, the founder and owner of Ultimark. To my delight, he was able to confirm a legitimate business relationship to Onemore Technology and told me of the details. The shell of the OneHit seems to be inspired by the Namco GunCon 1, which is also the shell Andrew pirated. The molding quality has to be one of the best I have seen in recent years. All details and surface patterns look very clean. The slide portion looks like brushed metal, the grip has a leather texture, and most of the face areas are glossy. The shell is very sturdy and feels great. The thumb cutout on the handle and the balanced weight make the gun very convenient to hold, even after prolonged play sessions. The side picture is very clear and great to use. The backside just looks like a Picatinny style rail and will not allow you to attach any accessories. Contrarily to the retro shooter light gun, the nozzle of the OneHit lacks threading and thus won't accept cellular phone lens kits. On the sides towards the nozzle of the gun are two square-shaped action buttons. For the Pandora Gun Max, the left button is mapped to mouse right click and the right one is mapped to middle click. The action buttons use tactile push button switches. On the left hand side there's a rubber dome based D-pad. It feels excellent and works great. It is mapped to the directional buttons of a standard joystick. The clicky trigger actuates a push button switch. It is tactile and very convenient to use. By default, the trigger is mapped to mouse left click. In my tests, all buttons were reliable. There are no means to connect a foot pedal to the gun itself. The 365 cm long cable is very sturdy. It ends in a USB-A connector and a DC barrel plug. The latter pairs with a supplied 24 volts 5 ampere power supply, which has enough breadth to power two such guns at once. DC barrel adapters and splitters have been permanently attached to the gun and power supply cables with shrink wrap. The OneHit has a solenoid-based force feedback system, which is just engaged when the gun senses the area light spots. It is very fast and strong. It succeeds to give an authentic arcade-like feeling. In case lower noise is desired, the solenoid can be tamed down in the Ultimark configuration tool, but that will also remove the joystick button mappings from the D-pad, as I will explain later in more detail. The supplied IR reference light bar is similar to the standard aim-track bar, but with rounded corners and more recesses, which host 3M sticky tape on the bottom. In the back, the light bar has two metal thread nuts as alternative mounting method. It uses a 144 cm long cable, which is terminated in a USB-A plug. Aimtrack style light bars have a big and a small reference spot, created by two differently long chains of IR LEDs. I think it's an oversight that the OneHit light bar is based on the original Aimtrack design, which stems from 2009. Back then, the average monitor size was smaller than it is today. Ultimark themselves don't recommend using this kind of bars for monitors sized 50 inches or bigger and offers alternative bars for such situations. These special bars have their light spots spaced further apart and use more LEDs, which results in bigger reference points. Personally, I struggled using the OneHit light bar on a 55-inch TV. Because the stock light bar is too dim and its spots are too small, I wasn't able to go as far back as it would have been necessary to yield very good accuracy. The light bar is shipped with additional mounting hardware such as a rubber foot. My unit is permanently bent and its sticky pad was attached to the wrong surface in the factory. The OneHit light gun is a two reference point system, just like the Nintendo Wii. Such systems carry inherent problems affecting the accuracy as soon as the player changes the player-to-screen angle or distance after calibration. Typically, two-point systems require frequent recalibration in order to yield peak performance and are just comparable to four reference point systems when playing on small screens from a large distance. Luckily, the OneHit can be brought into calibration mode by pressing the up button for 10 seconds, which makes recalibration a breeze. If the player manages to take place far away from a little screen and not move at all, the accuracy and precision of the OneHit light gun are very good. I measured the latency of the OneHit and the Aimtrack using a laser and a 260 fps camera as 32 milliseconds. This is a low latency and a good result, very close to or better than the Sinden light gun, depending on what kind of screen is used. The OneHit tracks about twice as fast as Arcade Europe's AE light gun. Some people might wonder now, as they recall hearing negative reports on bad latency for the Aimtrack. As I alluded in earlier episodes, this has to do with people who are unfamiliar with the concept of lag talking about it a lot. The Aimtrack was released in 2009. If you were to use the consumer gear from that time without any thought, connecting a PC in a laggy manner to a laggy TV, you could end up easily with a 3-figure number of video lag alone, not taking into account any periphery devices yet. Lag is additive and no light gun will be able to make input latency fine again by magic after it was butchered already by the video chain. Average monitors, TVs and video transmission technology have improved a bit, and now in 2024, even people who are blissfully ignorant may get lucky and might enjoy low latency without thinking about it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't still terrible devices, such as the Sony Bravia KD55X G7005, which although being released in 2022, has a 3 figures video latency. It's just that the odds to yield low video latency are better now. The OneHit light gun was supposed to be incompatible with the Ultimark Aimtrack configuration software and with the Harbor Entertainment version of the program. I can prove, however, that both programs work great with the OneHit, which is detected as having firmware 9.21. The highest Aimtrack firmware is 9.20. In the configuration, the player can adjust the force feedback and the IR sensor sensitivity. Also, the user can set up how the gun behaves when tilted sideways. A big drawback of using the configurator is, however, that Ultimark doesn't allow to map buttons to joystick directions, and the default mappings of the D-pad for the Pandora Gun Max were joystick directions. This means using the configurator would break the compatibility and would necessitate that the player navigates with another controller or adjusts the files of the front end and emulators accordingly. Counting the trigger, the Aimtrack module supports 7 input buttons. The configuration tool will hide the 4 additional buttons though, if the used light gun's firmware starts with the digit 9. This means configuring the OneHit with the Ultimark or Harbor tools, this will unbind the D-pad buttons. Luckily, I figured out that the software can be tricked out. If you connect an OEM aim track module or an aim track light gun onto which you have flashed an OEM firmware prior, then the configuration utility will bring up the hidden buttons. Now, if you keep the software open and connect a 9-dot firmware light gun, these hidden buttons will still be visible and now can be assigned. OEM firmware starts with the digit 8 and can be downloaded from the Ultimark website using the Wayback Machine or similar tools. The aim track utility implicitly states that flashing an 8 firmware onto a 9 firmware gun will break it, but that's not true and it worked fine for me. The older configuration programs allowed to see and to configure all the buttons, regardless the firmware, and therefore when using those, my trick is not necessary. Andrew Warren denies this fact, but at the same time refuses to provide older versions of his configuration tool. Fortunately, it's easy for me to debunk his statement. In this video, you can see me connecting a 9.15 firmware aim track, which has none of the additional buttons mapped, to a Windows 7 computer running the 2009 version of the configuration tool. I map the first additional button to joystick button 2 and the change remains persistent even after closing and reopening the program. If we go back to the most current utility on Windows 10 and use my swap for the firmware 8 controller trick mentioned above, we can see that the changes were indeed real and are in effect now. Stock aim track controllers are GunCon 2 compatible and can be used on a Sony PlayStation 2. Sadly, this is not the case for the OneHit light gun. As stated before, I don't own the Pandora Gun Max console. From experience, I know that such systems are low-effort emulation systems for people who don't mind supporting piracy and value ease of use more than perfect recreation. If that sounds appealing, you should do some further reading, but else you are better off emulating on your own on a powerful computer. Personally, I like the OneHit a lot. In my opinion, it is the highest quality aim track gun there is. As a preference, I like the 2009 Harbor Entertainment G-500 ArcadeGuns.com variant better for using genuine cherry micro switches all around, not just for the trigger, but also for all buttons. But that variant's molding quality is notably inferior to the OneHit. I think it's very sad that Andrew Warren doesn't allow Onemore Technology to sell this fine controller outside of a bundle. I really hope he will enter additional negotiations and deepens the relationship. Andrew is nearing his retirement age and a partnership could be a great way to lower his own workload while breathing fresh life into his 15-year-old controller design, which has proven again to be relevant still. Recently, we have witnessed several companies from America, Europe and Australia ripping off Samuel Ballantyne's Semco codebase without permission. Also, we saw Hyperkin using a Russian copy for the Duck Hunt on LCD TV product without even talking to the original developer. In times like these, it gives me hope that a Chinese custom arcade cabinet manufacturer went and negotiated a genuine partnership with an original developer. If you are just looking for a light gun, you are better served buying a Sinden light gun for $90 or building a gun for IR, which can be had for the cost of parts plus a little software fee. Those two controllers are still leaps and bounds ahead in terms of performance to any other light gun. The price for the Pandora Gun Max bundles, which contain 2 OneHit units, ranges between $370 and $400. That's comparable to the MSRP of the Retro Shooter console bundle, which is priced at $370, albeit often being on promotion for a lower price. Among those two recent Chinese light guns, my clear favorite is the OneHit for its far superior force feedback performance. My OneHit came shipped in a plain cardboard box, in a nice canvas sack. Included was a crudely inkjet printed manual, which clearly shows in 2 of the photos a Microsoft Windows desktop, challenging the secrecy of the PC compatibility. This is the end of the review. My name is Ben. I thank you for viewing.